everyone, I'm Captain Logan. Welcome back to the bunker. This time, you made me watch Cloak and Dagger, not the freeform series that started a couple years ago. I don't know, is that done now? Surely that didn't get renewed for a third season, right? Based on the Marvel comic that I did a review on the pilot for, and it was fine, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only person that watched. This has nothing to do with that. This is a movie from 1984 starring Henry Thomas, the kid from E.T., and he's really good in this, by the way. This is a sort of kids movie and a spy thriller that I had never heard of before. This is one of those kind of off-the-beaten-path movies like Flight of the Navigator that I imagine I might have seen on TV once, and there might have been a couple of scenes that would have stuck with me like that, or like Flight of the Navigator, or like Mac and Me, or like the Last Starfighter, which this movie surprisingly has an odd connection to. And while watching this, I really expected to see scenes that I recognized that I didn't know were from this movie, where I would have a light bulb moment and go, oh, I remember this movie. That never happened. I've never heard of this. I've never heard anybody talk about this. I didn't know that the E.T. kid starred in anything else, but that's not surprising, because you would have expected after E.T. that he would have kind of the Macaulay Culkin thing, and he would be kind of milked for all he was worth while he still looked like he was about that age. He plays an 11-year-old kid here. But I had never heard of this. This movie is strange. It is oddly pretty good compared to a lot of other movies that became cult classics from this period aimed at kids. And it is surprisingly violent, and the stakes are a lot higher than you would expect them to be. And until the third act, it is oddly a lot more believable and realistic than I might have expected it to be. I'm not calling it believable and realistic. I'm saying more so than I thought it would be when I came in. Especially after the opening scene, which turns out to be kind of a dramatization of a role-playing game, and so everything that's happening is impossible and ridiculous. And it's funny the way this movie sets the tone, or sets its tone, because it does a really good job at that, sort of, because I find myself having to, make this adjustment where I'm like, okay, this movie is going to be completely absurd, and it's not going to make any sense, and it's just throwing all kinds of silly stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And then suddenly a giant, D20 starts rolling down the street, and I thought it was going to be Super Fuzz all over again. A movie I did a rewind on a couple years ago, a weird TV superhero movie that just doesn't make any kind of sense at all, and its internal logic is all over the place. I thought that's what I was getting myself into here, and then it turns out that that was just the logic of the role-playing world. And so then, based on the adjustment that I had already made, everything else in the movie feels like it's the real world, like, in comparison. It all makes so much more sense. And so, like, my standards were so low that then getting into the rest of the movie, I found myself very impressed. I don't know if that was by design, but that is what that opening scene did. So I don't want to say that it did, a brilliant job of setting the tone for the film, because I thought I was watching some other movie. But because it made me think I was looking at something else, and then was pretty consistent and surprisingly tightly woven in its narrative after that, and had a pretty good sense of internal logic, I guess. I ended up really kind of appreciating that opening scene. So it's funny, it lowered my standards, and then I found myself surprised by the higher standard the movie was holding itself to. Anyway, this movie was requested by Stone Gassman on Patreon, so thanks a bunch to you. He sent me a message and said, this is the first real, honest-to-God movie based on a video game. And that is kind of true and kind of isn't the more research I've done on this. I said that it has an odd, interesting tie to Flight of the Navigator. These movies are both connected to or based on a video game, or about video games in general. Flight of the Navigator doesn't have anything to do, or Flight of the Navigator, excuse me, The Last Starfighter. If I said Flight of the Navigator, I meant Last Starfighter. This is I'll roll back for a second. This is connected to The Last Starfighter. And The Last Starfighter is not about a real video game or based on a video game, but is about a kid who plays an arcade game that was sent to Earth by aliens trying to recruit people who are really good pilots and really good, you know, starfighters, really good at shooting down, you know, alien vessels. It kind of uses it as a training tool to get people to help them in their war. And this is about a video game that is a single cartridge of an otherwise mundane game that is called Cloak and Dagger, that is used by the government to send a secret without anybody knowing about it, a military secret, and it's about a cloaked vessel. These things are always about something invisible, and it's called Cloak and Dagger, so I like that. I like that it's about something invisible. And so not all the games have this. It's not the way the E.T. game is used in the AVGN movie, although it made me wonder if James Rolfe wasn't at all inspired by this, and if he had ever seen this movie. I've watched a lot of his videos. I've never heard him talk about this. It would be cool to see him and his friends do one of their retail reviews on this movie, if they haven't already. But anyway, it's kind of like that, except the secret's not built into all of the cartridges. There's just the one. And so anyway, the idea here is kind of a Boy Who Cried Wolf situation, sort of. It's actually based on a short story called The Boy Cried Murder. Interesting that it's that the word who is not in there. It's just The Boy Cried Murder, written by Cornell Woolrich. And the idea isn't that this kid keeps... It has this massive break from reality and keeps claiming that he's that he's involved in a conspiracy that's not actually happening. But that is what his father will think is going on. But the idea is that he has lost his mother, he's had a traumatic experience, and he is overcompensating by and coping by throwing himself into his hobbies. And his hobbies include strategy games and in video games and tabletop role-playing. And he gets really good at this and becomes kind of a master strategist. One thing I appreciate about this movie is that we don't have a super genius kid just so that he can get from scene to scene easily, and so that the writers don't have to write a kid because writing children is difficult. This kid rings pretty true to me. He's just, and like, he's bright for his age, sure, but he's not like brilliant. It's not like a Wesley Crusher kind of situation. Davey is his name. It's that kind of 10,000 hours in anything makes you an expert kind of thing, or you know, makes you good at something. He just spends a lot of his time doing this, and he's you know, naturally adept at strategy. And so he does have an overactive imagination, and he is constantly pretending like he's a spy. But again, there's not that break from reality. He doesn't actually believe that any of the things that he's playing are real. He just wishes that they were. And so instead of a Boy Who Cried Wolf situation, it is much more of a be careful what you wish for situation. So he is friends with this nerdy guy at a mall who runs a game store, and this guy is constantly playing role-playing games with him and frustrated because the kid is so much better than he is at them. And he kind of takes advantage of this kid's obsession with pretending to be a spy by sending him to this company. I think it's a computer company or game-making company that he knows about, just to buy him some Twinkies out of the vending machine. And he says, there's a secret message in the Twinkies, so go get me Twinkies and bring them back. It's a very important assignment that I'm sending you on. And happily, I appreciate that Davey is not really buying into this, but he just uses it as an excuse to go play spy. At first I thought maybe there really would be a secret message in the Twinkies. I wanted that plot, or at least the the nerdy guy at his computer to be involved in the grander conspiracy, which doesn't end up happening. He will later get involved in an unfortunate way, which I won't reveal in case you've not seen this. By the way, if you want to watch this movie, and I'll go ahead and flip my sign green, I will recommend this. I am feeling this. I've got third act issues with this, and I think it desperately needs an epilogue. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this. And anyway, it is not available streaming anywhere that you likely have a subscription to. You can get it via Stars if you happen to have a subscription to that, or the Amazon add-on. I just rented it on Amazon. It is currently a $4 rental there. So if you want to watch it, those are the couple of ways that I know of, besides finding a DVD that you can do that. But anyway, this is a really touching father-son story, pardon me, in disguise. It's about a son whose hero really is his father, and he doesn't actually understand that or appreciate it until the end. Again, not to give too much away. And it's about a father who comes to appreciate, I guess, although again, I need another scene after the last scene of this movie. But I think the idea is supposed to be that it's also about a father who comes to appreciate his son's imagination and obsession with spy fiction and strategy games and stuff, because he is a military man. He is more or less in the kind of arena that his son wishes that he was in, and he actually looks up to his father and sees him as his hero, but again doesn't quite get that. The father, by contrast, was into all the same things that his kid is now when he was a kid as well, and has had kind of, shattering disillusionments and has had to grow up, and doesn't see the virtue in those things anymore. He sees those as like a nostalgic, bittersweet part of his past that he's had to move on from in order to live his life as an adult. And I think the idea is supposed to be, at the end of the day, both of these people have to come kind of closer to each other's perspective and find something in the middle. And so the kid learns that, and both of them have a character arc, although we don't spend enough time with the father. We spend a lot of time with the actor who plays the father, which I'll get into in a minute. He is, by the way, one of the major characters in the Towering Inferno. He's Daphne Coleman. I think he's really good in this too. This movie is pretty good with casting, although the little girl sidekick for Davy is kind of oddly cast. I think she's an okay actress, but I think she's kind of weird in this role. She's just so ultra-articulate and sounds like a thespian, like thespians I worked with in high school, like a theater kind of character. And unless that kid is in the theater as the as her character, it's a little odd that she talks the way she does. It's sort of like she has a 35-year-old's voice in an 11-year-old's body, and that was very distracting throughout. So the kid comes to realize that the world is far more dangerous and serious and scary than he realized, and that being a spy would not be all fun and games, that it's dangerous. When you carry a gun and you have a license to kill, two things are going to happen. A, there's a good chance that you're going to get hurt or killed yourself, and B, you may have to kill. And surprisingly, this is about that. This kid does have to face a situation where he may have to kill or be killed. And I was really impressed with that in a kid's movie. This is a kid who is in danger. This is a kid who has people after him who want him dead. It ends up being oddly kind of, although in a more mature way, a Home Alone situation, even though the kid is never at home, that where by the end, not only are the bad guys after him because he knows too much and he needs to be taken out because he's seen their faces, but also because he's made life difficult for them and they want revenge and they want him dead. So we have a movie where a kid is in danger and where the bad guys are very interested in seeing him dead, like are going to be excited and happy and probably have drinks afterwards when they have murdered this child. And yet the movie does not feel mean-spirited to me, because the kid has a lesson to learn about this. It is about actions and consequences. It's about the nature of violence, and the movie is not having any fun at that kid's expense. And like Home Alone obviously doesn't either, because we're supposed to be from, you know, Kevin's perspective there, and it's supposed to be fun for him watching the bad guys get hurt, so it's not like it's supposed to be fun watching the bad guys hurt him. There are horror movies that border on that. Neither of these things have that, but we also aren't supposed to be you know, enjoying what happens to the bad guys if they get hurt either. That's not fun. That is kind of scary, for this kid from his perspective, and it's the dark side of life. And so at the end of the day, I think the kid probably still likes all the things he likes, but would make me maybe think twice about wanting the job that his dad has. We get the big epic climax, which is just too over the top for this material, I think, and it involves a plane crash. Well, it actually involves a plane explosion, I'll say that. I'll give some stuff away, but I don't want to straight up tell you exactly what happens. But then after, I mean, it's a happy ending, I'll tell you that. But, you know, after the obligatory kid and father reuniting and coming to appreciate each other more, you know, scene, there's nothing after that. And I want to know if the father gets more lax about his kid playing these sorts of games, and I want to know if the kid starts to lose interest in those things, and, you know, how one grows up more and how the other becomes a kid more, or if those things happen, because I have to assume that that's what it is, but I don't actually know for sure, because we don't get that epilogue. I don't think everything needs an epilogue, and I don't think that it's bad to have any ambiguity. I also don't need to see a complete, and I wouldn't want this, a complete 180-degree, you know, turn from both of these characters. But I do kind of need something, because I see so basically it's a character arc with both of these characters where you see the opportunity for change, but you don't really see the resolution from that, and I do think that there needs to maybe be more of a resolution than we get here. I said that the ending is too over the top for the rest of the movie. There are some things that are really absurd about this movie. It's built initially on the conceit of this kid stumbles upon something that it's you know, it's built on some conveniences. Certainly, it's pretty easy that he's there when this happens, and that, and more importantly, that it is connected to his favorite video game. Like, what are the odds of that the secret plans the bad guys are after, because it's one of those plots, are, you know, the MacGuffin of the piece is the game he plays all the time, just to make it more unlikely and look as contrived as it does to his father that he's having some kind of a break from reality. Again, one thing I do really like about this premise is that the father thinks that the kid needs therapy, that it needs help. He causes this huge scene, by the way, in this building at this company, where he says there's a murder, and I liked it. A lot of the adults immediately believe him, because it would be like really irresponsible not to. And this happens in a couple places. It happens here, it also happens in an airport, where even though it's kids saying it, when they tell adults that someone has been killed or someone is trying to kill someone, they treat it like anybody else reporting that and immediately start sending police. Now afterwards, when they don't find any evidence, they're like, dumb kids. But I like that the movie is realistic enough and makes its adults reasonable enough that they don't immediately go, ah, stupid kids, and dismiss everything. I really like that. The father does borderline on that typical parent who never believes anything that the kid says, but he's made more sympathetic because, the kid, it is a situation that's very difficult to believe. That's the first thing. B, is that he does like sympathize with his kid to some degree. Like when Davy says, okay, you don't believe me that these henchmen are after me and trying to kill me, but I don't feel safe. Can I stay in your room tonight? He says yes to that. I would have been totally out if he'd said no, and like, you can't play these games anymore, and I don't believe anything that you said about what happened today, and also you have to stay in your room all by yourself when you're absolutely horrified for your own life. So at least he doesn't do that. That's really good. And then, of course, he comes around at the end when he pretty clearly has to, or he would be either a complete nut job or you know, just totally daft. And so I guess you like him more at the end, but that stuff's a little forced. It would be nice if he was in the movie more. Like I said earlier, the actor, however, is in much more of the movie than that character is, because he also plays the imaginary friend, who is Jack Flack. And when I first, so he's like this super spy who is, I don't know if I was getting this right. Is he the protagonist of both the video game and the board game that they were playing, or the RPG that they were playing? I think he's both, and he has like a little action figure of him. I love, by the way, the symbol of the action figure. There's a thing that Davey does with that at the end that is a wonderful, clear opportunity for change that I like a lot. So he has Jack Flack kind of as an imaginary friend, and as soon as that name came up, I heard Jack Black, and I was like, oh, that's hilarious. Like, before Jack Black was a name, there's this fictitious character in this movie called Jack Black, which like sounds like a really good name for a spy, for this hero character, but it was actually not that. It was Jack Flack. Okay, so I don't know, a lot of things that this movie sounds like it's about, but actually has no connections to whatsoever. Anyway, the guy who plays Davy's father is also Jack Flack. So throughout the whole movie, while he looks up to this Jack Flack character before his father, that is the way the movie is constantly communicating. He's actually looking up to his father. He actually wishes that he could be his dad and do what his dad does, and if only his dad would appreciate that he is a hero and why kids want to be heroes. And again, the dad, you know, talks about his credit, and this is the other reason that he's kind of sympathetic and why the script was a lot more sophisticated than I expected it to be. When he was, this is an example of that, when he was a kid, he was also obsessed with being a hero, which is probably why he went into a career that he went into, but being a hero is different from what it looks like in games. And he says, this is, I think, the best writing in the movie, when he has a speech to his kid about how being a hero is also about boring things. It's about taking your kid to school and to his after-school activities, and like, it's not all glamorous. It's not all action and excitement. I loved that. Just weird degrees of realism in a movie that is pretty absurd in a lot of places. Another thing that was really realistic is there's a scene where Davy has to drive a car in a car chase, and has never driven before, and it's completely believable the way he attempts to drive this car and runs into things and keeps getting stuck and has to figure out how to pull back out. And you'd think that he would get in this car and he would have like a couple of token, you know, tough moments where he'd smack into a couple of things, and then after that he'd be like, you know, rounding corners and like he's been driving all his life. That doesn't happen, and it's awesome. I was really impressed with that. But anyway, imaginary friend angle is a cool one, but it gets kind of awkward and muddled by the end because there seems to be almost a supernatural component to it. I can't tell. By the end, the imaginary friend acts like there are rules to being an imaginary friend, and that he has been Davy's father's imaginary friend also, that they have even the imaginary friend in common. And I don't know if that's just an elaborate imagination on Davy's part, or if it actually is a transferred imaginary friend. But one thing that makes it more complicated, and like thematically, I sort of like that, the idea that they would share that if it is a supernatural thing and it turns out that imaginary friends are real and it's almost like guardian angels or something. It acts as a guardian angel throughout the whole movie, where there are places where, particularly when Davy has massive self-doubt or is horrified and doesn't know, or rather petrified, and kind of freezes up and isn't sure how to get out of a situation. And then that's when Jack Flack is there and says, you know, you need to do this. This is the spy code. But it also seems like, you know, the part of his psyche that is unrealistic about the spy stuff and thinks that it's all fun and games, and keeps talking about it like a game. And there's a very clear moment when Davy finally says, this is real life, it is not a game, I don't need you anymore. And then later on, you know, he thinks he needs the imaginary friend, but he has actually gotten over him. But anyway, there are moments where the imaginary friend seems to know more than Davy does, and I don't know if that's just like a compartmentalized other part of his psyche, where it's like he actually really did understand something, but it was sort of subconscious, and he needed this this part of his this part of himself that is manifesting as the imaginary friend to tell him that, or if he actually doesn't seem to know things, but this imaginary friend does know things. There are places where it seems like just the perspective of where he's standing somewhere, he'll tell something to Davy that he couldn't possibly know. But the weirder thing is that there are places where he will physically pick up something and hand it to Davy. Or something like that, where like they have a physical interaction, and you have to imagine what the actual interaction was, because he's not actually there. But if it's supernatural, if it's a guardian angel situation, maybe he did pick up those things. So I'm a little bit confused about that. It is not a deal breaker. It's not a big major thing. It was a lot easier to just imagine that things happen slightly different in a scene than they possibly could have, until suddenly he starts talking about it like maybe there's a supernatural component. So I'm not sure about that. Other big criticism with this movie, besides that I think it jumps the shark in the third act with the way that plane explosion I mentioned is handled. Before that, there's just some convenient places where characters seem to have read the script. There's, and I'll throw out a couple of examples. There is a bomb and a walkie-talkie that is put there by a henchman. It seems like just because he wants revenge on the sidekick chick, or a little girl, I should say, and it's kind of odd, first of all, that he even does that. That he like takes the time to do that just because we need like your obligatory you know, ticking time bomb at the end. There are some really great suspenseful moments in this movie, surprisingly. Like, I didn't expect this kids movie called Cloak and Dagger to actually be a decent Cloak and Dagger type movie, and it actually really is. That was not one of the things that I found very compelling. It seemed like a really contrived ticking time bomb. And so that's one thing, but there's a moment where Davy is talking to her on the phone, or excuse me, on the walkie-talkie, and when the walkie-talkie stops working, he's able to surmise that that must be where the bomb is. He just does not know enough information to get to that. It could just as well be the walkie-talkie's not working. There's another place where this happens, where the henchman... oh, I know what it is. Yeah, the henchman know exactly where the video game is so there's a place where, and it's handled pretty well, but we do the kind of standard like trade-off where a character has a decoy of the MacGuffin that the bad guy is after. The bad guy accepts the MacGuffin way too easily. The first thing he should expect is that it's not the same game. So I had that thought, but later on, the bad guys are able to figure out, just because the kid was at that mall, unless I'm missing something, that's where the game that they're actually after is, the one with the secret plans. And I don't know how they made that leap. So yeah, there's some characters seeming to have read the script, issues in this movie. But once again, I am feeling it. I was really surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did, and that it was, at least characterization-wise, that it rang true as well as it did, and that it's not terrible even as a spy thriller. I didn't talk about the elderly couple that turns out to be part of this whole thing. They're a little bit too easy as well, the way that the kid runs into them. But anyway, I'm getting too thorough, having said that I wasn't going to spoil everything, and assuming that you guys haven't watched everything. So hopefully I didn't give too much about this away, or I don't know, I should have said earlier, like, maybe don't finish this review before you go watch this. I don't know why this isn't more of a cult classic than it is. I think it is. I'm not going to say I like it better than The Last Starfighter, and certainly I have a lot of nostalgia for that movie, but I think that it is a tighter movie and more cohesive than The Last Starfighter. And I also think that it's leaps and bounds above Flight of Navigator. And I'm just talking about those movies because they're movies starring kids that are, oddly kind of, adult and more violent than you would expect them to be, at least in places. This is not a sci-fi movie, but it reminds me of those things in that way. I also should mention the history of the whole video game thing a little bit, because I meant to talk about that toward the beginning. So, like I said, Stone Gaspin, who asked me to review this, is kind of right in that this is the first movie based on a video game, but only sort of. So there was a Atari game that was being developed at the same time this movie was being made, called Agent X. And Agent X is also, in this movie, the name of is Jack Flack's alter ego, or his agent number or whatever. And they were developing these things at the same time and discovered that they were both making these things, so they decided to collaborate and use the game in the movie. So it wasn't initially based on the game, but it kind of becomes that later. So it's hard to call it an adaptation, so it wouldn't really be the first video game movie in that way, but it sure looks like it because this was a real game. Kind of. It's kind of weird because, so Cloak and Dagger was released, and by that name, as an arcade game. And the footage that we see in this movie is of the arcade game because it got finished. So it's weird because when they put in the 5200 game, you see footage from the arcade game, which would have been impossible to put on that cartridge. And I was watching this going, that can't be an Atari, a 5200 game. It looks too good. There's no way that it could process that. And indeed, I was right about that. What we were looking at was arcade footage. There was a 5200 game that was being developed that was supposed to release simultaneous with this that ultimately was scrapped, I'm pretty sure because of the video game crash. This was a really awkward time for movies related to video games because they were being developed as video games were at the time at the height of their popularity. And then during the, so, this is of course before Nintendo, before the Wizard, so there was, an interest in this is a new medium, and as at the very least, new toys that kids were playing with, and that could be marketed in movies, and movies could exploit them to get kids interested in seeing them. But the problem was, when you get to the video game crash, now people aren't buying video games, but these movies were already in development, so we have to release them. So now it looks kind of outdated, because you're into 1984, which is post the crash, but you're also starting to already get away from Atari 5200 and also, by the way, Atari has been sold by the time this movie comes out, and that hadn't happened yet when this was getting put together. So this is, as Nintendo is coming out and about to take its big foothold. So I think all that is really interesting, but. So anyway, the movie doesn't have any footage from that 5200 game, and that never came out because the crash had already happened. I'm pretty sure that's probably the reason that it didn't get finished. But yeah, this is even a game that I had never heard of before. So kind of fun as a video game movie, and like I said, it should have more of a cult classic status than it does, I think. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and let me know in the comments if you have ever seen this and what you think of it. I was pleasantly surprised. It's not a perfect movie. I've got big third act issues with it, but overall, I'm really glad that I watched it, and thanks again to Mr. Stone Glassman for asking me to watch it, and did I say Glassman? Gasman, and in the meantime, if you would like to make me watch something or read something for the Comic Vault, so you can do a comic book or you can do a movie, you can become a patron at patreon.com/geekvolution. Join the $15 tier there, and you can join that for just 1 month. Once you let that roll over, you can get a single review, and if you want to stay on that tier, you'll be in the rotation, and you'll get a review every 2 to 3 months. We have about 10 to a dozen guys there right now. So anyway, appreciate all of you guys for watching, and anybody that has ever requested anything. Thanks to all the patrons. You guys are all wonderful. Sure appreciate you. I am Captain Logan. See you next time.